Hey Nora, I hope you're doing well this week, and we're really thinking about you and praying for you. Um, and I wanted to share with you some of our Bible stories this week. So, our Bible stories this week are about this little guy, and his name is David. He is very young in our stories that we're having this week. In fact, he is probably 5 or 6 or 7, kind of like you, a few years older than you. And David was a shepherd boy. In his family, he was the one who took care of the sheep. And it was a very hard job. And when he was out in the wilderness taking care of his sheep, he had very hard things that he had to do. One day, he saw a lion, and he had to kill the lion with his slingshot in order to save his sheep. And another day he saw a bear, and he had to scare that bear off in order to keep his sheep safe. So he was always thinking about those sheep and keeping them safe. And God was preparing him. He was preparing David to take care of those sheep and to have strength to be able to do that and courage. I know that you liked that one song about be strong and courageous. And maybe you could sing that to your mom. I'll send a link to you so that you know where that is. So David was a shepherd boy. Well, one day, Samuel, the prophet, and you remember him, he was the prophet who was just that little boy who was laying in bed, and God called to him. And he said, "Yes, Lord, I'm listening." And now Samuel is an old man. He's a prophet who takes God's words to the people. So God told Samuel, go to David's family, the family of Jesse, and when you're there, you are going to anoint or find a new king. And so Samuel said, "Yes, God, I would do that." So he went to Jesse's family, and Jesse lined up all of his boys. He had 6 boys, and he lined up all of those boys, and David was out in the field. He was being a shepherd, so he wasn't there. He was out in the field, and a lot of his family thought he was too young anyway to be a part of Samuel coming over. So Samuel came, and he said to each of the boys, as he stood in front of the boys, he thought, "Oh, this boy, this man, he is going to be the one who's going to be king." And so he went in front of the boy and he listened to God, and he said, "God, is this the one you want me to anoint king? He looks really strong, and he looks handsome, and he looks like he could be the next king." And God said, "No, Samuel, he is not going to be the next king." And Samuel went to the next brother and he said, "Oh, God, he looks like he could be the next king. He's handsome, he's strong, he's tall." God said, "No, I don't want him." And to the next brother, God said, "No, not him either." And then he went to the next brother. No, God said, "I don't want him to be king either." And finally he came to the very last brother, and Samuel said, "It has to be him. He has to be the one I choose." And God said, "No, not him either." And then God said this to Samuel. God said, "Samuel, you look at the outside of people, but I look at their heart." And Samuel said, "True, God, that's very true. I was looking at just what they look like on the outside, but God knew the hearts that were ready for him." So Samuel said to Jesse, "Jesse, do you have any more boys?" And Jesse said, "Yeah, I have one more boy, David. He's out in the field being a shepherd, but he's too young, and he's too little, and he wouldn't be a good choice." And Samuel, the prophet, said, "Please bring him to me." So they brought David to Samuel, and God talked to Samuel, and Samuel listened. And God said to Samuel, "This is the one that I want to be king." And Samuel looked at David, and he looked small. He was much smaller than all of his brothers. He was younger. He wasn't as handsome. And God told Samuel, "This is the one. I look at the inside, and David's heart is ready for me," God said. "Not at the outside, but at the inside." So Samuel knew this was the one that God wanted to be king someday. And he put oil on David's head to show that he would be the king someday. So David had a very big job to do, And another day, I bet you're going to know this story, Nora. Another day, little David was out in the field being a shepherd, and his dad said, "David, I would like you to go visit your brothers who are going through a war with the Philistines. I want you to visit them, and I want you to tell me how they're doing." So David went to visit his brothers. And when he was visiting with his brothers, he heard this very, very angry, loud voice. And the loud voice said, "Who wants to fight me today?" And all of the soldiers were scared and nervous and shaking. And everybody ran and hid. And David said, "What is the problem?" And his brother said, "That is the giant Goliath, and he is going to kill us. If one of us fights him, then our team wins, the Israelites win. But if he fights us and he wins, all the Philistines win, and they can take us over." And David said, "We can do this. God is on our side." And all of the people in the army said, "Oh, I don't know. I'm so scared. I'm so nervous." And David said, "God is bigger. God can do this. He can do it. Not us, but God." And you know what David did, I bet. He took 5 stones from the river, and he put those stones in his slingshot, and he said, "I will fight Goliath, and I will not be the winner, but God will be the winner." And so he put those stones in his pocket, and he put them in his slingshot, and Goliath stood far away, and David stood right across from him. And look at this. Look at how small David is compared to how big Goliath is. He was just a little boy, and Goliath was huge. He was almost 10 feet tall. That's almost as tall as the first floor of your house, I bet. And David said, "I can do this with God's help." And all he had was a stone and a slingshot. And he took one of those stones, and he put it in his slingshot, and he turned it around and around and around, and he let it go, and the stone hit Goliath right in the center of his head, right where he didn't have any of his armor. And you know what happened, I bet, Nora. Goliath fell down with a crash. David had killed Goliath, but not David, and not just the stone, but God. God was more powerful than this giant, and God had done it, and he used David. David was the one he used. Do you think, Nora, that God can use you? He has a plan for you, and he can use you. Sometimes we don't feel like we're very powerful. Sometimes we feel like we're kind of young and kind of scared. But you know what? Just like David, God has a plan for you. You just need to listen and obey and trust him. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. All right, Nora, I hope you liked our stories. We're also going to do a craft with David and Goliath that I will send to you tomorrow, and maybe you and Grant can act out the David and Goliath story together. So we love you, we missed you, and we hope you're doing well. Bye-bye.